Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen. A special guest this week, none other than Mr. Eric Darnell Anderson, better known to the wrestling world as the son of a preacher man. Ebony Blade, welcome to the show, sir.
Good day. How you doing there, Joe? It's good to talk to you.
Very good. Very good. Pleasure to have you here. Appreciate you taking the time. Looking forward to this, kind of take a deep dive into your career and what you got going on outside of it. So, let's rewind to the very beginning for you. Growing up as a child or young adult, when did you first discover pro wrestling, and who were some of your favorites growing up?
Let's see. I think I first discovered pro wrestling. It was here. We were in the States. I was about maybe 4 or 5 years old, I think, maybe. And so then it's undoubtedly it would have been the wrestling from the Olympic would have been the first thing that I would have come across. So during that time period, you would have had people like, Roddy Piper was making his debut. And we were there for his first heel turn, which I think came in 77, I think around there. Chavo Guerrero was huge. Then you start noticing all the Mexican wrestlers that were coming in, all the luchadors. And so you could see at the time, we had the great tag team, Gordman and Goliath, out here. You saw them. LA was a hotbed for a while. It's the LaMilk promotion was its dying days, but that's happening. But then we had a lot of family who lived in the American South. And so we would visit there a lot. And that's when I started seeing a lot of wrestling that was sticking me. So one of the first ones who I noticed who I really enjoyed would have been Jack Briscoe. And Jack Briscoe, I thought was, even as a kid, there was something special about him to me. And remember the presentation of the show then, for the most part, you were still having this athletic endeavor that was being presented to you. So Briscoe would have been one of the first ones I'd noticed. Terry Funk, Dory Funk. We also would have noticed as well. We had a lot of family, I remember, out in Blytheville, Arkansas, which is right next to Memphis. So Three Gisses, who I saw early on and was like, yeah, that guy's entertaining. But what's odd is that when I first discovered wrestling, it was not as big for me as, like, at the time, roller derby was actually the sport in the sports entertainment industry that I was more involved in. Growing up, I was baseball, football, American gridiron football was the one that first drew to me. I wouldn't get into classic football until later, somewhat ironically. Those were the things that were of interest to me. It was only a little bit later on when the Superstation was broadcasting everywhere, and you saw more Dusty Rhodes, saw Tommy Rich, more Austin Hall, and then obviously Harley Race. But we were seeing Harley in LA now I think about it, back in the 70s too, because he was he was also recognized, I think, as the local LA affiliate, I think, was using WWE, World Wrestling Associates, I think was the name. And they were recognizing the NWA World Champion as their champion. So Harley Race, you would see there too. And at the time, thought Harley was just the most dangerous person you'd ever seen, in your life in a technical and tough way. I remember back then, the two names that scared people more than anything were Abdullah the Butcher and the Sheik. Just those two names on a card meant that you knew you were going to be mayhem. So it wasn't until later when I really started getting into it, I'd say late 70s, early 80s, is when it started happening. And one of the big draws, I'll admit, was, this blonde-haired world champion that we put on, on the NWA broadcast from WTBS, Ric Flair. That was a huge, huge influence for a while.
And was there a certain moment or a certain
So
point?
that's when I first started watching. And then from there, I have this problem. I've always had this problem. I think it was why I was a history major. Once I get an interest in something, I have to know everything about it. So
Right.
I started studying the history of wrestling, pretty early. I was probably about 10 or 11 years old when I really started studying it and learning it. And then I had the chance to see wrestling from all over. Then went back to England, saw everything there. And of course, that was just beyond mind-blowing. Stuff from Japan, stuff from Mexico. So it just kind of became an organic interest for a while, long before I had any kind of understanding of the business of it, or even fully understood the psychology of it. You just knew that in certain places things felt different, even if you couldn't place your finger on it.
And starting to become a wrestling historian at such a young
Joe, you
age.
still there? Oh, okay.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
All right, yeah, you had a solid face for a minute there.
Oh.
So that's how I got started as far as an interest goes. As far as wrestling goes, I was playing football actually, and there was a guy who came to us, Don Diamond, I think was the name, asked if we had an interest in wrestling. At the time, all of us had said no. He was there again, said sure. I went to this workout in this rundown, place with a gym and a ring. And before I knew it, I started falling in love with the whole thing. And then it just kind of picked up from there.
So when did you decide to, actually get into the wrestling business? And, when was that moment where you said, all right, you know what, this is something I could do. I want to give it a shot, and, talk about the training and how you got in.
Let's see. I believe I was 13. I think when I started, going to that gym. I didn't make a debut until I was 15 or 16, I think. And then it was local shows. And I think that where it really started to occur to me was when I started understanding more about the background. And even then, I didn't throw myself as fully into it until probably it was just before college. Just before college, when there was a chance to be in a variety of other places, and then seeing other things. Then there was the Slammers Wrestling Gym out in was it Sun Valley, California, I think. Vern Langdon, ran it, et cetera. And from there is where things really started to change because one, you met people like, suddenly here's Mildred Burke. Not Mildred Burke. You're talking to Moolah. You're talking to Mae Young. You're talking to Billy Varga. You're talking to Jay the Alaskan York. You start going to Cauliflower Alley Club. And back then, the Cauliflower Alley Club annual event was very different. It was a dinner that was held at the old Sportsman's Lodge. And you're there, and suddenly in walks Lou Thez. And seeing how the whole room changes the minute Thez walked in. Vern Gagne's there. Here's Ray Stevens. Here's John. So, of course, this is like heaven. Here's Dick Bayer. Oh, my God, it's the fucking Destroyer, talking about wrestling with Danny Hodge. Learning very quickly not to say the word, oh, shoot, anywhere around him. That was just, that inner circle was a big part of it, too. And meeting people like Kurt Brown, Vandal Drummond, who we started nicknaming the Cherry Popper because he got so many guys. He was their opponent in their first match for so many of the non-Mexican wrestlers in Southern California, for a lot of them. And very caring, very, very giving. He taught me just about everything I need to know about being a babyface, because we did a program earlier where I was the babyface, he was the heel. And he really laid into me about where to get your timing, when to have your comeback, how to sell to each side of the audience. And he's the one who introduced me to Dr. Jerry Graham. And meeting Dr. Jerry Graham and doing training sessions with Jerry Graham was a huge learning experience. I got the chance to do a 4-day camp with Billy Robinson. That was great. So every time I had a chance to learn something, I just kept wanting to learn more and more about it. And it certainly beat it working a fast food job. So weekends, you could go ahead and you could go. And this was back when it was a strange combination of you could get wrestling matches every day, but the territories were like dying. And when I came in, we didn't know they were dying yet. By 86, you knew they were dying. By 86, you knew they were dying. It was only a matter of time. And so that's when I focused a lot more in lucha because there was more work.
Right.
So that's pretty much how that happened. Yeah.
And why don't you tell us about the Ebony Blade gimmick, how you came up with, the name, where you got your tights from over the years, just the gimmick itself, the entrance music and how you tied that in.
Oh, yeah. Well, the entrance music, you must be referring to Son of a Preacher Man. And that actually didn't come for years later. But okay. The first idea for Ebony Blade actually was a tag partner and I, Ray Scott. We were working someplace, we did a loser leaves town angle. And then after we lost, I came back under a mask as Ebony Blade. He came back under a mask 2 weeks later as the first Union Jack. And that's where we had the English Enforcers. Years later, my best friend Jamie Lowy would be a tag partner of mine. He would take the Union Jack name. I had the Ebony Blade name, and we stuck with that. The reason I chose that was at the time, and I think I was young. I was probably 19, 20 at the time, I think, when I came up with it. There are a few things that stuck out. One was that almost all the Black characters that we were seeing, not all of them, but almost all of them, at that period, there was a lot of, they went a lot for you're either very country or very street. Yeah, it was very suburban. It was, my people, let me tell you what's going on. I'm going to hit you with the butter. And that wasn't really me. And the best gimmicks really are the ones that are just you that turn over. So there were two things that stood out. One was to answer a question. Yes, I was born in England. Did not grow up there. Did not grow up there. Most of my life, I consider myself a Long Beach kid. Long Beach, California is home. And when I was young, I learned very quickly that when you're the only Black kid at a school and you talk with an accent that people have never heard before, you get mocked a lot. There's no Idris Elba. There's no, they don't know anything about Lenny Henry. So I'd gotten rid of all of that when I was younger. But at this, I was sitting with Kurt, and as we were talking, we started thinking about it. We said, let's take this in a little different direction. So instead of London, which was the city I've been most associated with for my life outside of the U.S., grabbed a Manchester, nice working class, place. It was the city that we were born in. Though I haven't set foot in it in ages, except to go to Manchester United football games. Glory, glory, Man United. And then what started happening was started breaking it down. I said, okay, we need something that works. And I remembered Le Mot d'Arthur, The Death of Arthur, Mallory's great piece on the Arthurian legend. And I remembered a line in there. You must strike like yon ebony blade, swiftly, brutally, and mercilessly. And that's when I came up with Ebony Blade. What was strange was, first I was going by the name of Rick Darnell, the Ebony Blade, and then slowly it all started to break apart to where eventually Rick Darnell was gone, was gone, and it was just Ebony Blade. As far as the son of a preacher man gimmick comes in, that was... Dusty Springfield had recently passed away, I think. She recently passed away. And my mother was a tremendous singer, had actually sung with Dusty a few times. And I started thinking about it. I said, something? I've got it. I have numerous uncles and my grandfather who were all preachers. And I knew how to preach. I knew how to go ahead and speak the word of the Lord if I had to. I could tell you this. I could tell you about heaven and hell. I could tell you about the road to paradise. I could tell you about the lily of the valley. I could tell you about Mary's baby. I could tell you about the man who's a doctor in the sick room. I could tell you about a man who's, but then I then added the extra bit, of course, of let's take a bit of the distinguished Englishman and let's add a little bit of the Southern preacher. And if we combine it, what might we get? So that's when we came with Think of Dusty's song, because the thing is, at the time too, everybody's music sounded as if it was either all white rage music, or it was all hip hop. But Son of a Preacher Man was a song that I knew. I said, it's a proven hit. It's 30 years old.
Yeah.
It's already established. It will get over. And I often joke that, when people talk about me getting over, I often say, look, I think 80% of that was the song. I think the song got me over more than anything once I, turned it back to babyface. So that's how that came about. And then it just snowballed from there to where it became a whole identity, and to a point where, before I left, I couldn't have told you where Eric Anderson started and where Ebony Blade began. I couldn't tell you. They've become so merged, one after the other, that they're even, there were times when even my wife, would be like, yeah, I don't want to talk to Ebony. Let me talk to Eric. Okay. Right. Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So that's how that happened.
Well, the first time that I met you in person was actually, I was not even in the business for a year. It was at UMass Dartmouth, the university there, for UCW. Unified Championship Wrestling. Did a backstage interview with you.
Oh yeah.
That night you wrestled Jose Perez, and
Yep.
just wanted to
One of my
see what your
favorites.
memories are of Jose and working with him.
You know something? Jose is one of my favorite opponents because one of the things about Jose that I always liked was one, and during the 90s, you had that whole thing where there was so many. I look back at some things I did in the 90s that were hardcore. Wish I'd never done it because it wasn't what I was trained in. It was me following a trend as opposed to staying the line. But one of the things I loved about someone like Jose is that Jose could do both. Jose could do that East Coast intensity, hardcore. Fine, let's bring out garbage cans and have fun. But he could also go hold a hold with you. Go hold a hold all the time. He's a very giving wrestler in the ring. And I have potatoed him probably more than anybody I ever did. I always feel bad about it. And he has never held a grudge, ever. Never held a grudge about it at any point in time. Working with Jose, I won't say it's like a night off, because Jose's going to expect you to put in some work when you're in there. That's the thing. He's going to expect you to go. And he'll go with you everything you need to do. If you want to go hold to hold, he'll do it. If you want to break down the brawls, he'll do it. If he wants to do the high kicks, he can do all that. I loved working with Jose. And outside of the ring, I like spending time with him. I love spending time with he and his family. They've been great people to me. I left New England. Yeah, this year makes 20 years. I left 20 years ago, and I still miss a variety of people there, and they're near or at the top of the list. Yeah.
And how did you first find yourself wrestling?
They've helped out a lot of people. I went to law school. I mean, that's really it. I went to law school there. And for me, wrestling was one of the things I've always loved about wrestling. In fact, I love it even more than law in this aspect. While I was active, no matter where I went, you could always find a place where you could work. And if you could get a chance to work, and if you showed you were willing to be giving and help younger groups and help the promotion, you could always be a part of both the business and the family.
Right.
And so one of the things I heard about, so I went over to Kowalski School. At the time, I couldn't be over there that often because, frankly, Walter's prices were professional. They weren't. I was going to say they weren't overpriced, at all. They were not overpriced. They were professional. That's what they should have been. They made sense. But in law school, I wasn't working. If I was still teaching at the time, that might have been different because it was in Malden. I was in Boston. But then I found out about promotion down in Rhode Island. It was UCW, Anthony Rufo. Yeah. So I went down there, started working with some guys. One of the people I was working out with was Billy Black. And I think, I don't know if people remember, but Billy Black and I had a very long history together in the ring. And from there, just kept going. From there were other places that I would work as well. I was about to start working with Tony. And then, scheduling wise, there were issues. But other things, but Tony Rumble, also a great guy. I remember doing a TV audition with Tony when I was living in New York, and they were doing a show called Monster Wars. And the guy who arranged for me to speak to the casting director, and the casting director was a wrestling photographer, by the way, as well, was one of the students at the school where I worked. His name is Joel Gertner.
Yes.
And yes, the Joel Gertner. And Joel, so at this audition, I'm there, and other people were there. Tony Rumble's there. Taz is there. He was still the Tasmaniac at the time. Paul Roma was there. So we were all talking, and that was a fun time. So Tony remembered me when I came to Boston. I said, "Oh, we met at the TV thing out in New York." He's like, "Oh yes, I remember." And so that was that was nice. So I didn't spend a lot of time there. Chaotic 2, one of my problems started happening in my trial schedule. My trial schedule started to take over. And as much as I love wrestling, my first love is, it's law. It's being a trial lawyer is the first thing. So that's where it got a little bit more difficult to keep myself available. But it was a fun, wonderful, experience. All my years in New England were precious to me, both on the legal side and the great people I met at BC Law, and on the wrestling side. There's some people who have heat with me now because of things I've said, but I can't really worry about that. The positives have outweighed the negatives.
When it comes to UCW, you worked for both iterations. Like we said, the late 90s, you worked for Unified Championship Wrestling with Anthony Ruffo. And then he would run Ultimate Championship Wrestling, another version of it, just a few years later, around 2004, 2005. What was it like working for Anthony? Do you have any memories you could share of Anthony himself?
I have nothing but pleasant memories with Anthony. For one, he was in my interactions with him, he always acted professional. He kind of, one thing that was funny was we were at, I can't even remember the school. It might have been Dean College, maybe. I can't recall. Or maybe it was one of the schools in Rhode Island. I can't recall. But anyway, they were having some problems with some tech issues, and he needed, to kind of delay time with the audience. And he comes over to me, and I hadn't been there that long, but he'd seen me talk. So he said, "Look, Eb, I need you to go out there, talk to the crowd, keep them occupied till we get something, going to, continue on." I said, "Okay." And I go over as I get ready to walk out. And I look over at Billy. I knew Billy was champ, but I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, this might not be a bad way to establish real quickly,
Yeah.
who I am and what we can do. So I tell Billy, I said, "Billy, here's what I need you to do." And he says, "Yeah, what?" I said, "Well," "when I say these words," I can't remember the words were, but I gave him the key. I said, "You need to start coming out to hit the ring." Right? I said, "Okay, yeah." And then I think we may have had music, I can't recall. But I'm there, I come out, I'm in full, heel mode. And remember, Billy's been a heel this whole time. Billy's been a heel this entire era. And I'm talking about it. So the only thing I start to work, of course, is it's not just the heel, but this is a British heel,
right,
who has no respect for any American one way or the other. And Billy comes out and he cuts this great promo on me. And then from there, there's a discussion about, the problem is you won't even challenge me. He's like, "Who have you beaten?" All these other great things. Finally get the word they're ready to start. We come back, and then that leads to the program with Billy and I later. And I would say that was probably the first thing that made me, so to speak, inside of the New England area was that program with Billy.
Bad Boy Billy Black, yeah, definitely one of the greats here in the New England scene. He was around for a long time, several promotions, had a lot of great matches with a lot of great talent, and you guys had an awesome program, across all of New England, basically, over time.
Yeah, Billy might be my favorite opponent of all time. He might be. I mean, just working with him was like putting on a glove that just always fit.
Yeah.
Just everything, worked. And I liked it, really well. And again, he didn't take liberties. He knew when to lay it in, and he knew how to work. He knew how to work the crowd. He's an underrated babyface because he's very good at being baby, but he's a great heel, underrated babyface. He too, and I think one thing that I liked was I could see people Anthony had trust in, and that's the other thing I liked about working with Anthony was Anthony was not afraid to, at least in my experience, not afraid to ponder ideas from other people.
Sure.
And that was one of the things that I liked too. I mean, we were in a situation, I remember I was getting ready to leave because I think I was graduating law school. So I was getting ready to leave. And at the time, I didn't know I was going to be back in New England. I thought I was going to be out in California and stay there. And I'd been I can't recall whether it was UCW or IIW champion, whichever one it was, one of Anthony's promotions. And I was getting ready to, he was going to have me drop the title. I said, "Yeah, sure." And he told me he wanted me to drop it too. Now, up to then, I should mention, I'd always had these particular rules. My rules on championships for me was I win it clean. Might be some controversy, but the pin is clean. And I lose it clean. Always. Like when I drop it, there's no question as to who's there. I win it clean, I lose it clean. Those are kind of my rules. Because I think that in the business, we've gotten way, way too far into every time a heel wins a championship, it has to be some kind of dirty dealing. Or we had gotten to that point. I was like, I didn't want to do that. So anyway, he mentioned who it was. And I said, "No." I said, "Can't be him. Can't be him. Won't do it." And I'd never said that to anybody at any point in time. And I was like, okay, so well, why not, Eb? And I told him, I said, because he can't talk, and whoever follows me has to be able to, if he's not outstanding in the ring, has to be able to talk, because otherwise they're just going to look lesser. I said, outstanding in the ring, you can outshine me in the ring, great, people can forget that, but this guy couldn't do that. And so then I saw somebody in the corner. I said, well, who? I saw somebody in the corner I've been watching for a while. I looked, I said, him. I said, he's the one. Said, he's got energy, he's got fire, he can work in the ring. And that was Kyle Storm. And so we made a decision to do that. And the way it was going to work was, he said, okay, great. So then on the last match, your last match, you'll go ahead, you'll lose to Kyle. I said, no. I said, what we need to do is 3-match series. First match, double count out. Second match, he beats me and wins it. Third match, he beats me again. This way, it's clear he's the champ. He's the number one guy. I'm out. And Anthony was like, yep, that works. That's a perfect program. Let's do it. And so that was one thing I appreciate, is that if you came to an idea, because that's the other thing in wrestling too often, guys, they'll go to somebody, but they won't say about the program you want to, here's where I think you want to go. I think if we go this way, we'll get to the same place you want to be at. It's just a better way of getting there. And I think too many times guys will turn around and say, and from what I hear, there's less of it now than there used to be, of guys just refusing. I hear there's a lot more people saying, okay, let's try this instead. So that creative end is always nice. And I've always been happy about that. I've always been happy about the way that ended, the way Anthony handled it. And to his credit, Kyle never forgot it. When Kyle was promoting, one of the first things he did was contact me and talk to me about being in. And I remember saying to him once, I said, Kyle, I don't know if I can get over today. And he said, trust me, Eb, you're going to get over. He said, all I have to do is give you a mic for 20 minutes, over the span of 4 weeks, you're getting over. Right. I said, okay, I'll try it. And he was right. I was wrong.
And obviously you've worked with Kyle, again, like you said, PWF Northeast, New England Championship Wrestling, Sheldon Goldberg, these different promotions that you work for in the New England scene. Do you have any memories specifically from your time in PWF or for Sheldon?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I first met Sheldon, and I talk about this all the time. Sheldon and I first met at the Slammers Wrestling Gym in California. And I was about 19 at the time. I was 19. Sheldon was there for a big event that Vern was hosting. I think it was an anniversary. He was doing one of those, and that was a great event. I mean, God, Marlena Evans from Days of Our Lives was there. Sam Houston was there. Jason, God, why am I forgetting his last? Jason Harvey, was there. Terry Funk was there. That's the first time I met Terry. So they were all there. But that's when I first met Sheldon. So I was just a kid. So I've been in touch with Sheldon for years, still in touch with Sheldon. I see him at the Cauliflower Alley Club events, so I'm probably going to miss this year's because I think, I'm going to be in London and Dublin for 3 weeks.
Okay.
In April. So being gone in June, July, and August just isn't going to work for me. I gotta stay close to home and get work done. But yeah, I've had a great relationship with Sheldon. I've appreciated both his historical knowledge and the way he's always treated me. I know there are people who have issues with Sheldon. None of those issues have happened with me. So I can only speak for my interactions with him. My interactions have always been positive, always. From the time I was 19 and now I'm 55. So, and I appreciate him too, because you learn over time, the people who helped start you, the people who saw you when you were young, the people who were, once they start going, a piece of you dies.
Right.
A piece of that youth dies with you. And so I'm at that stage in my life where it's like, I appreciate every single second I have with those people.
And, looking at the wrestling business as a whole, what would you say the progression of it looks like, from when you were in the business, full time to where the business is now and where it's become, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one. I think about this a lot. I should mention this. I am now TKO stockholder, have been for years. That stock has grown over 1,000% since I got it. So obviously on the business end, I am a huge WWE fan. On the wrestling end, for most of the last, I'd say 15 years, I don't watch much. I may catch highlights of a show. I follow what happens with people I know. Kofi, obviously, Todd, obviously, others who I've known. Johnny Gargano, who I knew from his work out here. Others. Whenever I hear that, because I was on anyone I knew who's doing well to continue doing well. Period. I always want them to do well. So I think money-wise, the wrestlers are making more money than they've ever made before. God bless them, and they're doing it. Working less dates. God bless them. That I think is good. Because I've thought for a long time wrestling should shut down or at least put wrestlers on different cycles so they can break off, rest, do things. I thought the absence of kayfabe was bad from a storytelling standpoint, because I think having kayfabe, but I also understand that kayfabe was going to die anyway. There was no way to keep it enclosed. As we all know, once you started getting the internet, once you started getting these communications, once you started coming out, it was going to happen. Just like the territories were going to die. We didn't fully know it at the time, but the minute TBS went national, it was only a matter of time before somebody did what Vince did. It was only a matter of time. It was going to happen. And that, of course, made storytelling more difficult. Because one of the problems that I have with wrestling now when I watch it is, and let me talk about a positive. The athleticism is off the charts. Just off the charts. These people do things that I wouldn't even have fathomed doing when I was in the best shape of my life, which was me at 204 pounds at about 4.5% body fat. Okay. I couldn't do what these people are coming up with. Just couldn't, wouldn't even think of it. But the need to always move the bar higher athletically, and when you have this great athleticism, is they want to show off. They want to do things that are incredible. They want to do things that will make people go ooh and ah. And I get that. I understand that. It just stops being entertaining for me after a while. I despise the thigh slap. It is. I can't get through a show now because, and it's not the fact that people are slapping their thigh to make the noise of body contact. It's that they do it all the time. It's like it doesn't have the effect anymore. And my question, I remember when Chris Adams was doing the super kick, who I still swear to this day did the best super kick ever. Sorry, folks. I just think he did. Just did. But a couple things I noticed, if you go back and you watch Chris Adams' matches, these strange things happen. If he gave you the super kick to the stomach, there was no sound. And you would bend over and go down. If he gave it to you on the chin or in the back of the head, lights out. And that's when you heard it.
Right.
It wasn't every time he threw a drop kick, he slapped his thigh. It wasn't every time he kicked someone in the head, he slapped his thigh. It wasn't every, and that's what's become problematic for me. But now with kayfabe gone, there's been too much of a mindset of, if it's not real and we're not asking you to suspend your disbelief, then it doesn't matter what I'm showing you because you already know that the problem that I have is it's like if you're watching a TV show or a movie and a character is flying and you see the wires, they at least make the effort to hide the wires.
Right, exactly.
And too many times now they're not trying to hide the wires at all. It's like, I don't want to see anybody else falling off the top of a cage or some high structure onto a crash mat because I can see the crash mat. I can see all the foam that you have there. So I know that you have worked yourself into this position, obviously, for so long that now I don't feel any kind of risk. I don't feel like I did. I don't feel any kind of thrill. I mean, when we saw Shane McMahon do that big fall, you remember the huge one that he did.
Yeah, that was
straight back and down. We weren't expecting that.
Right. And
while it was protected, they did a very good job of not having you expect it. Now it's almost every time you see a Hell in a Cell match, right? People are waiting. Well, who's going off the top of the cage? I saw that with AEW when they did their version, with the big cage and all the people in and everything. And it's like, I see where you're going. I already know the finish of the match.
Yeah.
I've got a pretty good idea of it because I could see the pad right here. It's that one great thing about kayfabe was it forced you to work within a universe with rules. The way that I used to say it all the time was, it's like in the DC Comics universe, you can take a gun and you can stick it to to Superman's head, pull the trigger, and the only person getting hurt is you. You know you can take the gun and stick it to Clark Kent's head, pull the trigger, and the only one getting hurt is you. But you also know that if you were to take that gun and point it at Bruce Wayne's head and pull the trigger, Bruce Wayne is dead. Right. You need a universe and with universal rules. One of these drives me crazy. We got a contract signing for a title match at WrestleMania. Great. You're going to have to defend the title tonight here against The Undertaker. Well, wait a minute. Do you need a contract for a match, or can somebody just order it?
Yeah.
Which one is it?
Right. And it's never consistent.
And for me, when you lose that logic, it's harder for me. Now, at the same time, they're making a shit ton of money. Huge money. I mean, the second promotion in the country, which is not nearly the size of the WWE, still makes a metric ton of money. So on the one hand, business-wise, they're right, I'm wrong, because they're generating, business. But from an interesting long-term way of doing things, I don't even now WrestleMania, we already see it's not going to sell out.
Yeah.
It's not. Part of it is there's no compelling story to make you watch it. Right. The other thing, which is a huge complaint I have about WWE, and I have it now about AEW too, I can't speak to TNA, but one of my big problems is, why the hell are there so many titles?
Yeah, that's true.
And I've had this complaint for ages. It's so what? One guy is the Monday night champion and the other guy is the Thursday night champion. What if more than one guy is the guy? Then guess who the guy is? Nobody.
Yeah.
And I grew up in an era when part of the purpose of a title reign was to establish somebody one way or the other.
Yeah.
And I remember when I used to be able to, I think as late as maybe maybe as late as the mid-90s, I think, I could tell you every single AWA World Champion, every single NWA World Heavyweight Champion, every single WWF Champion, every single WWF Intercontinental Champion, every single WWF Tag Team Champion. I don't know if I could list all the ones from 1999.
It's true. Yeah, it changes so quickly.
It changes so quickly. And what they've done is they've taken that, which, yes, the championship was always a prop, but like any prop, it has to have meaning. Right. What's its purpose? And they've taken it from that to just making it an actual prop. When I look at how many reigns does The Rock have, like 7 or 8, right? How many of them are meaningful?
Right.
Cena, 17-time champion? Yeah, but how many of those are real quick? Lost it on Thursday, got it back, the next Tuesday or something, yeah. and it didn't make anybody. Back in the day, Tommy Rich had a career based upon his popularity in Georgia, his popularity in Memphis, but also he held the NWA World title when very few people did.
Right.
Very few people had it. Now, you look today, how many people in the WWE, how many people in AEW, I'm not going to go, but in WWE, how many people on that roster can claim to be a world champion, whether it was the WWE title, whether it was the Unified World title, whether it's the Universal title, how many of them? A huge lot of them. And to me, folks, it's not about deserve, because the problem is there are usually always a whole group of deserving people. It's just that it starts to lose. When Kofi won, and admit, I got a bias because I know unlike Kofi, I got a bias there. But when Kofi won, it was a big deal. When Daniels was a big deal, in part because they're not the people you would have expected to win it.
Yeah.
And they won it over high quality opponents. And then later on, they crapped on them by having them lose those titles in terrible ways.
Yeah.
47 seconds against, and again, sometimes you get people titles too early. I was sad. I would have much preferred, The Miz, if they hadn't slung that on him early in his career. If they'd drawn it out a little bit more. Right. Same thing, Ziggler. Does people remember Ziggler was a former world champion? No, because they did it when it had no meaning. So my problem is that you can't compel me to watch your program when there's nothing compelling about what you're giving me. I didn't care about bra and panty matches. I didn't care about who was sleeping with who. It works as an angle when you do it and it's rare. But when you're doing that angle and it's the same angle every 2-3 years, it loses its luster.
Yeah.
And I say this keeping in mind, it's a very difficult job these people have because they have to come up with 52 weeks of storyline for these enormous rosters. It is. I understand. It is difficult. It is extremely difficult. But I think one reason why I think WrestleMania ticket sales are hurting now. And again, the company's going to be fine. Even if they don't sell out WrestleMania, they're going to be just fine. Yeah. They're going to make money on this. It's, they're not at death's door, people. It's not going to happen. Blind monkeys on crack running the WWE could not screw that place up now. And there are no blind monkeys on crack running it, so they're going to be just fine. With all the heat that Levesque gets, he knows what he's doing. And part of being in charge of a promotion like this too is you are going to have down periods. You're going to have high periods. He will get through the down period. They'll be fine in the long run. I'm just saying that for me, I'm not watching something that I find interesting. I'm certainly not going to watch 3 hours of any wrestling program a week, let alone, I used to watch everything. I used to watch some crappy wrestling from all kinds of places because I just wanted to see wrestling. That's all I wanted to do. But now it's like, no, I don't have it. And you have to remember, I bill between $650 to $750 an hour. So if I'm spending 3 hours of my time watching a wrestling show, that's what, about $3.5, $4 grand? That's what I see it. Is this worth me giving up, $4.5 grand of billing time to go do this? I'll do that to watch family. I'll do that to hang out with my family. I'll do that to hang out with my friends. But to watch a wrestling show right now, I can't say it's worth it to me. Sure. I'm more into the highlights. And I say that, keep in mind, there is so much talent. There is so much talent that's working out there. Oh, it is incredible, the talent. And I'm so glad that, they're taking their health far more seriously than others did. That part is great. I think that's better for the business. That's better for the careers. As much as I love watching people do this, I'd be perfectly happy if every wrestler's career was like 10 years, they were rich and then got out and went on to something else.
Yeah. Yeah, there have been a lot of great improvements over the, just the past couple years. And they're really looking out for the talent, which is great to see. And, should have been going on, for so much longer than it has. But, basically when it comes to pro wrestling, let's talk about the psychology, putting together a match. I think the viewers would be interested in hearing, how a match is put together.
Well, it depends. And you also remember that changed radically because when I broke in, what you knew was you knew your finish. You knew maybe 3 spots, and the rest of it was all improvised. The rest of it was all called on the spot. One of the problems I have with wrestling when I watch it today is everything looks choreographed from beginning to end. And when it takes me outside of that, that's when it's harder for me. Yeah. But when it all looks natural, then it's less of a problem. And I understand why they plan out from beginning to end. Now, particularly when you're talking about the big promotions that are on TV and have so much at stake. When you're talking about all the time, and I've sort of TNA, obviously AEW, WWE, these folks are dealing with multi-million, in some cases billions of dollars on TV contracts. They cannot have anything go wrong. They want to keep it as tight as possible. They've got times. I understand why they do that. And I also understand why wrestlers love house shows, which I think we're going to see the end of real soon. We're going to see the end of house shows at some point. For the big promotions, we will. But I think it's one reason why wrestlers love house shows, that they can be more free. They can have more fun, do crazy stuff, break character if they feel like it. So I think we're going to see a great deal of that. When you're putting a match together, I think the first thing is you start with the finish. To me, it's where are we trying to go? And we can work it. What's the story we're trying to tell? Because that's the other thing. It's not just, flips are great, but if you're going to do them, then do them for a purpose. I always said, the day you see me do a moonsault, you've seen my last match. because you know that's me reaching deep into the bag to come up with something and throw it. You know, at my last match, I did not do a moonsault. I teased it, you know, just to get people thinking about it. But then after that, I was like, yeah, we're not doing it. The other thing is, what's the story you're trying to tell? You know, how are you trying to get this person over? What is it? Are we dealing with the scrappy up and comer? Are we dealing with the unbreakable hold versus the master escape artist? You know, what are the things you're doing to get there? I mean, one of the things I've always thought was great when you talk about psychology, and we've talked about Jake Roberts all the time. But one of the things I always love is notice in a lot of Jake Roberts matches, a lot of what happens is it's people being immediately aware he's going for the DDT and getting the hell out of there.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the minute you feel that thing coming, it's, no. I'm gone. I'm getting out of here. I'm getting out of the ring. I'm sliding out. It's because they all knew it was dangerous. They all knew it was dangerous. And they all knew if you got a hit with that, it was lights out. You were done. Call it a day.
Yeah.
And that to me was great because that would be because the fans would want to see it. Give us the DDT. And then you have those moments, of course, where he hits the DDT. This is it. Jake's got him. Oh, the ref is down.
Yeah.
The ref is down. Oh, damn it. Come on. You know, those things have been, great. I think that part of that big part is what's your purpose for your match? What's your purpose for long term? So, for example, a lot of times you have guys, the up-and-comers, and they're just going to say, look, all I need from you is I need 10 exciting minutes. But don't do this, because that's happening later on in the show. So keep them interested. Bring them up slowly, then go high, and then here's your finish. You know, that's one of the things you can do. And others, you can sit there and say, look, you two despise each other. You've despised each other for a long time. Okay, the bell is not even going to ring, and you're going right at it.
Right.
The bell, and so it's what's the purpose, and that's where your bookers are really important because they're supposed to know what the long-term mission is, and the short-term mission. They can also tell you, like, look, here's this kid now. We're not going to push him. We're going to put him in front of people. We're going to let people see him. We're going to do this. We're going to let him a little bit, and then we're going to send him off someplace else for 4, 5, 6 months. Then we're going to bring him back. He's going to have a new hold. He's going to have a new move. He's going to do something. Then we're going to start to build him up more. So, in the matches, what you're going to have is, he's not going to be the winner, but he's going to come close a few times. He's going to come close. He's going to show fire. It's he's in there with just to give a great example from my day, because I apologize, I don't know everybody who's working in New England now, but okay, we've put this guy in here in the ring with Luis Ortiz. Okay. He's in there with Luis Ortiz. And at first you think Luis is going to kill this guy in about, 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But if Luis takes 7 minutes to put this guy away, but puts him away convincingly because he's Luis Ortiz, he's at this level now in this area. That's what happens. It's like fans can look and go, yeah, good effort, kid. That kid's got some moxie. Kids, he's got maybe one day he'll have a future. Then you bring him back, 6 months later after he's been off, he's learned a few things, he's doing things. Maybe there's some, heel who's beating the tar out of him somewhere, going above and beyond. Maybe and who comes in to make the save? Luis Ortiz. Because I respect that kid. That's why. So I'll back you, kid. And there it is. So now you've got something where you can work, and then wherever your story is going to go, you go from there. Yeah. I think as well, I've always thought, again, old NWA guy, I've always thought championship matches have to have a different feel than anything else. They can't feel like regular matches, from the announcing to how they start to where you finish in a series. I still believe in the same thing Sam Munchnick had. You can have your champion, in a hole for match after match, but at the end, he's got to win. He has to win. People forget. Dusty Rhodes does clean jobs with Superstar Graham in the Garden, in addition to because at the end that's what had to happen.
Right.
And it certainly didn't hurt Dusty Rhodes' career because he's done. He's Dusty.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that is, and yes, there are some people who are special and unique. I remember when I said I was done at 36 and I wasn't going to be doing this, anymore. And so, oh, you can keep going. So, look at Funk, look at Flair. And I'm like, yeah, that's Terry Funk and that's Ric Flair. So that's, yeah, they can keep doing it because that's who they are. They're, right. I am not in that class. I'm I've had my run. I'm ready. I had my run. I'm done. Helped a few youngsters on the way, and there we go. So I think that's where the same thing with the matches. You plan it based upon what your goal is and what the story is to tell. Because at the end, like the Goldberg thing is a great example, right? Goldberg's a monster. The whole point of every single match was he destroys people. But no, then they started feeding him people who had a different name. And it took him longer, but he still, at the end, blows these people up. He blows up Kurt Hennig. He blows up Hugh Morris. He blows up Paul Orndorff. All these people he just blows up. And you've established this guy is a freaking force.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how you do. It's if you hot shot, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you long-term plan with where you want to go with your and you know what story you want to tell for everything, then you're there. I think that's a problem with too many both big shows and independent shows that they don't plan out. But with that said, there are also some great independents out there who do wonderful long-term planning and know exactly what they want.
Yeah, long-term planning I feel like is kind of a lost art, for the most part as a whole. Growing up as a big fan of pro wrestling, I've always had a passion for wrestling, so I've enjoyed pretty much all outlets. I wasn't really that picky on like yourself. You just take it in. Mm-hmm. And back then the buildups were so good. I felt for pay-per-views. The guys wouldn't really connect prior to a pay-per-view if they're building up a big match, or if they did, it was impactful and it was brief.
Yes.
Where nowadays you're seeing these buildups to the pay-per-views last maybe just 2-3 weeks, first of all. And then on top of that, a week before the big pay-per-view match, they're in a tag team match, each with a partner and connecting and having a full-blown match before their big match. And I just hate that. It's always been a pet peeve of mine the last 10 years or so. And then the other side of that, the finishing moves. Back in the day, obviously wrestling changes, of course, which I get. But, Shawn Michaels, he hits the super kick. Okay, it's over. Jake the Snake, he hits the DDT. If there's no interference or anything, it's over. And nowadays, a super kick is just a setup. Well, nowadays a super kick is a setup for another super kick, but it's just constant finisher after finisher after finisher, and it's like it just takes away the special feel. It takes away the impactful, meaningful. It's like what moves actually mean anything anymore. I don't know that there are any.
Well, I think one of the things that's problematic is I found this funny. I've had people who've gone back and they'll go back and they'll look at an old wrestling match or something, and one of the ones they love to bring up is they said, yeah, Kerry Von Erich beats Ric Flair with a backslide. With a backslide. How did he beat with a backslide? I'm like, you mean that pinning move that was used by several wrestlers, including Dory Funk Jr. when he was world champion? You mean that? You mean a guy won a wrestling championship using a wrestling maneuver? Why is that odd? It's because we've now trained the audience that the only way to win is either a tap out or and I'll speak to the tap out in a minute, or a concussion. That's what we've turned it into, and occasionally a small package. And that to me is bad because why are we trying to emphasize that one has to be concussed to be beaten when you can do wrestling? I've always said, you show me a guy who comes out here now and finishes people with an abdominal stretch, he'll be my favorite wrestler, or she.
Right.
Because here's the problem. If you put somebody in the abdominal stretch now, you're not going to get a pop. You're not going to get a reaction. Why? Because we haven't seen anybody tap out to that thing in forever.
Right.
How are you going to sell a submission hold if people don't submit to it from time to time?
Yeah. Even the chin lock, it would be an opportunity for the wrestlers to just kind of calm things down a bit, get a breather in there, and a chin lock wouldn't even work nowadays. No,
it would. It's I remember Tony Atlas used to tell us what he learned early on. I can't remember who he said taught it to him, but one of the things he said was, when in doubt, put on a wrestling hold, because it's the one thing that everybody looks at and can believe is real. Yeah. So we need to slow down. Put on that headlock. Put on that arm bar. Put on that leg. Grind that thing in. You can communicate there. You can decide what you're going to do next. You can get a feel for the audience. All these things you can do. But now what happens is everything is from high spot to high spot to high spot to high spot. And the drama is left in the recovery from a high spot to a high spot. I mean, one of the things I hate now is this after the kickouts. you know, you're shocked that somebody kicked out of this, maneuver of yours. But you can be shocked when that maneuver always works.
Right.
But
Exactly.
we already know it takes you 4 attitude adjustments to go ahead and pin a guy. My view is it should, because the attitude adjustment, and I say this with so much respect for John Cena, really, one of the hardest working people you'll ever see in this business. It's a shitty finisher. It's a fireman's carry.
Right.
It's a standing fireman's carry. That's all it is.
Yeah.
There's nothing about it that looks impactful. Only thing that makes it impactful is the sell. That's it. The only thing that makes it impactful is the sell. I feel the same way about the F5, to be honest with you. I mean, okay, so you threw him up as a helicopter and then he goes, I don't see it. Whereas, wait a minute, you just German suplexed this guy 8 times? I got news for you. Brock Lesnar German suplexes you 8 times. You'll be begging him to pin you.
Right. That's it. It should be there.
That's right. Any normal human being, he gets on top of you. You're like, I am not moving. I'm staying right here. Because please do not throw me again, Mr. Lesnar. Okay, that's the great finisher. So I mean, that is one of the things that's difficult, is that we've now, because again, we made the spectacle bigger than the storytelling.
Sure.
And when you've made the spectacle bigger than the storytelling, then it loses the real drama of the story.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to see people come up with more things. It's funny how submissions change. When I broke into this, I would tell you this now, I wrestled for 1983 to 2006, so about 23 years, I think. Okay. I never lost a match by submission. And I'm not saying that because it's this giant point of pride, though it was very helpful when I got ready to do the I Quit match with Matt Storm. Very helpful to have that. It was just that there weren't people using submissions. I'd lost falls, but never a match. They just weren't doing it. If I broke into business 5 years ago, I wouldn't be able to say that now. There's no way.
Yeah.
Because people use submissions more and they make sense. And that's one thing I have liked, that we see more people using submissions, because no matter how big you are, you get tied up in the right way. That's one of the reasons I switched to the sugar. Sugar made perfect sense. Absolutely, I can get somebody to submit there. One way or the other.
Right, exactly.
Either by agreement or by force, you're tapping this out. So I think that's one of the things that's happened too. And I would love to see, I think even now with the finishers, we've got to make them dramatic before we do them. Shawn Michaels, of course, had to do that tuning up the band thing. Wait a minute. I'm in the ring. I hear you stomping. I know what's coming. It's like when Undertaker said on his podcast show, when there were people giving him a hard time, I think Lesnar or somebody had pulled him off the top rope when he was doing the old school walk. And he's like, folks, you think they haven't seen the videotape? They haven't scouted? You think they don't know that this one? Of course somebody at some point is going to pull me off.
Yeah.
Said it makes sense. I'm like, yes, if you do these things. It's I don't need to hear I don't need the big dramatic twist all the time before you hit something. It's why I love Randy Orton's RKO when it comes out of nowhere. When he does the big spin around to set up for it, after a while, I'm like, I've seen the shtick. I'm done with it. But when it comes out of nowhere, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It works. That one I can buy. So yeah, I'd love to see people do that with finishers, respect them more. I'd love to see more people win wrestling matches with wrestling. But I also admit that this is me, again, 55. I'm out of the prime demographic. The prime demographic for advertisers is 18 to 49. I recognize I am not the audience that anybody is shooting for. So, I know what I like. I know what I think might work, keeping in mind that I haven't worked outside of a advisory capacity in the business, for 20, I think the last match I ever actually did was like 2014 or 15 I did for an Elks Lodge show. That was it, which of course by pro wrestling standards means I've been quite retired.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what would you say has been the greatest challenge for you within the industry, not in the ring, but just in wrestling as a whole?
God, it's hard to say. You also have to remember, see, for me, I always knew that wrestling was something I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved being a part of it. If I could make a living at it, great. Well, I can't say I made a living. I did make enough money to survive when I needed it, at plenty of paces. It did help put me through law school. There's no question about that. It helped put me through college. But for me, it was also, I always knew where my real future was going to be. It was always going to be, it was always going to be law. So I didn't really think about the challenges. I think because that was my approach, I had a different approach than somebody else who's sitting there and going, this is where I want to make my living for good. And when I'm done in ring, I want to be around this for the rest of my life. That person has a whole different set of issues to deal with than I do. So there are things that I could let be water off a duck's back for me, because what do I care? But for others, it's kind of like that decision could have a long-term effect on me.
Right.
And so, then they have to look at it differently. At what point do you refuse a gimmick? If somebody come to me and be like, okay, here's the gimmick for you, Eb, we want you to go ahead. We're going to call you, Wrestling Jim. You're going to be like the Nigga Jim character in Mark Twain. I'd be like, see ya.
Yeah.
If I'd been in WWE when you told me, yes, the boss wants you to kiss that. Let me see if I get this straight. You want me to go on international television and kiss a white man's ass? I said, yes. See ya. If you don't, you'll never work here again. It's okay. I know where law school is. I'll be all right.
Right.
That's a very different position than if you're somebody who's you want to be in that business. And that kind of humiliation is for you just part of the act and part of the character part you do. I get why they would do that. I couldn't. So for me, I can't really say that I had problems. I was treated very well, very fairly. The only thing for me has been timing sometimes. Like I was wrestling in when I was in New York. I was wrestling in New York, met people, and then thanks to my good friend Billy Firehawk, who I still miss to this day, Billy and I started doing a set of TV tapings for Eastern Championship Wrestling. Now, I left New York before it blew up. And I realized, had I stayed, someone like a Paul Heyman really could have done something with me. I know that without question, he could have done something with me. Would have found something. That would have been great. That would have been fine. But I also accept that wasn't my path. My path at that time was I had to go back to California. It's fine. I've left the state 3 times. I've moved back 4. That's what I needed to do. That's where my path needed to go. So I can't say that I've had any real problems. I think one of the problems was as I started getting older, there's a certain level of action or BS you tolerate from people in the business that maybe as I got older, I just couldn't tolerate much. I had shorter tempers for misbehavior.
Right.
That was unnecessary. There's one incident that's famous, where I took conduct I tried to correct conduct in my own way, as was taught to me, the old school way. But as I got older too, that was I wouldn't do that today. Today, I wouldn't do that. Today, I'd pull the kid aside, sit him down. I'd talk to him a little bit more, all that kind of stuff. But I think generational stuff happens all the time. So, yeah, like I said, I was fortunate. I was lucky. I loved it, but I never needed it. So because I never needed it, it was never really a problem. I get asked sometimes, what do I miss? Do I miss the crowd? I'm like, it's. I remember the largest audience I was ever in front of was something like 5,000 or something, maybe more, and that was great. Loved it. It was wonderful. But I can't say that I necessarily missed that. What I miss is I miss being one of the boys. Now, when I'm in a locker room, in some places like here, and if I was in New England, I think the same thing would happen. It's more of an elder statesman kind of thing.
Yeah. So
you're in the business. They know you've done things. Someone may have seen you when they were growing up and they can respect you, but at the same time, you're not one of the boys anymore.
Right. It's not the same feel.
It's not the same field. It's not the same thing. And that part I do miss, but I also understand that's a part it's why when I'm telling people, I tell the students all the time, you have to enjoy this moment because the day is going to come when it ends.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side of your greatest challenge, obviously you didn't really have one, like you said, but the flip side of that, what has been the most rewarding for you in your career?
Oh God. It was the twofold. One is the chance to perform, which is always a gift. It's always a gift when you get the chance to perform in front of people, to feel an audience, read it, know how to react to it, the knowing how to bring people up, bring people down. I've said this 1,000 times. Everything I needed to learn as a trial lawyer, I learned in pro wrestling. There's no question. A closing argument is nothing more than a promo. If I can talk you into a building, I can talk you into a verdict. Yeah, but it also only works if I have the evidence.
Right.
Okay, and it's the same thing with wrestling. You can sit up there and talk about how you're the greatest wrestler on God's green earth. You know these fantastic, wonderful things. But at the same time, if you've been in the business for 2 weeks and you haven't beaten anybody, how do you say that? And why are you saying that? Maybe you're saying that because you're a heel who's going to get somewhere and do it. Okay, fine. But make sure that you've got something that backs up what you're talking about. And if it doesn't back up, then have someone who calls you out on it and then respond to it. One of those things like, and there I was, Gordon Soley. There I was, right on the verge of victory. Clean living. Wait, what's that in your hand, Mr. Sullivan? I don't know what you're talking about, Gordon. Well, we have a videotape right here. They'll show it. You've doctored the tape. You've doctored it. Well, now you're responding to this. Now you're getting it out a different way because the evidence has been following you. Now you're going to blame everybody else. Now it's another reason for the fans to know, hey, he's a heel. I can't trust him because he blatantly lied to me and he got called out on it. He's trying to lie his way out again.
Right.
Those kind of things. Learning that was great. I've never had a problem being in front of an audience, and it especially helped because with wrestling, you're doing theater in the round, all the time. And in some cases, you learn to live the gimmick. Jerry Graham always told us, he said, the show starts when you wake up. If you have a show that you wake up, you know that you have to go into the mode of that show from the beginning all the way through to the end. And that can have its drawbacks mentally. It certainly can. I mean, we've known many wrestlers, and I include myself in this, who at some point, are too into their gimmick. And then they can't separate one from the other. And in some cases, it's a dangerous gimmick. I mean, there's always the story. At what point did Richard Flair become Ric Flair? We don't know. But we know, I don't know if Richard Flair is out there anywhere. We all know Ric Flair is very much alive and well.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a classic example in that regard. The other thing, of course, was it was the being around. It was being in the locker room. It was the association. I mean, I tell this to people all the time. I said, some of the people I love the most in the world are people who have hit me over the head with chairs. They've thrown me through Coke machines.
Right.
I mean, and yet I trust these people implicitly. It's grand. I got to watch people go from being young rookies to becoming major stars. That's great to watch. I mean, that was like when I was teaching. You get to see this. I've seen people who are unsung heroes suddenly get a lot more recognition. I mean, Bob Evans is one. Mike Hollow is one. Some people don't realize what the folks who train do. I'm glad to see that people do understand, of course, that, I was calling Java Rook, Johnny Ross, because he's Java Rook in LA. Johnny Ross, right? One of the most important people in the history of wrestling because of the training that he does. And people don't realize how many times people like that. And it's not just you were like, fine, you may have been a star, but can you teach? Mike Hollow can teach. Bob Evans can teach. Johnny Ross can teach. And because these guys can teach, that's a huge impact that they have on the business. And watching them get attention and credit for it now, is great. Watching other people decide, I'm going to listen to these people and watch those independents get better and better and better. That's been wonderful to see. And that was, as I said, very rewarding. I remember my times outside the ring with the people that I knew in New England as much as inside the ring. Dinner over at Jose's house, going over to Alan, Jason Blade's, restaurant, which is, wonderful occasions to be at. Going to Fire and Ice in Cambridge with the boys. That's one of my, I even almost get a little choked up about it because it was, and the thing was that when it happened, unlike a lot of things, I knew these were special moments and enjoy it while you have it. Those were great things. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and George Carroll. Oh my God. I mean, who is not happy about seeing someone like George Carroll, one of the most decent people you've ever known, who wanted to be in the wrestling business, who knew there was really only one way in, but did everything he could at every level until now he's beyond living the dream. I mean, good God, that's one of the most wonderful stories
Yeah.
I've ever heard in my entire life. That's great.
George is
So
one of those guys, he's setting up chairs. He'll do whatever he needs to do to help your show, become better behind the scenes. He's always offering, hey, what can I do for you? What can I,
absolutely.
and now look where he is, and it's paid off.
Absolutely. It has. It's paid off. I mean, he's a winner in every single aspect. Like great family man, great job. He's going to be in that company for age. Very loosely using the term, I'm happy to say I'm proud he's one of my employees.
Yes.
As a TKO stockholder, we are proud of having someone like a George Carroll working for us because he's just all class. Love that guy.
What would you say was your biggest takeaway from your time in New England?
One is there's a ton of talent in New England, a great wrestling history, a giant ton of talent. There's a reason. I used to think that the reason why you got so many people from WWE going to New England to find talent was because of the proximity. But it's not just that. There is a lot of knowledge there. There's a lot of history there. There are people who still respect it in that regard. Sure, you have a variety of chuckleheads, but you get chuckleheads everywhere. And I think the chuckleheads weed themselves out. They kind of do. They don't stay the course. They don't stay committed, or they don't act professionally. And I think the New England environment sometimes does a good job also of, and if there are different standards and levels, I mean, Chaotic, of course, had a very high standard. NECW, high standard. And they knew what they wanted and what they tolerate and what they wouldn't. And I think you could either learn that lesson or you could get pissy and bitchy about it. And some people got pissy and bitchy and, they didn't go further. Other people understood it and then followed and went. And that's why when the phone calls came, you had people like Hollow, you had people, like Sheldon, you had others who would sit there and say, yeah, these are the people who you can come take a look at this kid. Come take a look at him. Yeah, he's someone you can have. We'll put you on a show. We'll do these things. We'll make sure they know you. I think it's one of the best places to train and learn out there. Even still, and there are far more centers now than there ever have been before. But in New England, I think it's also good because remember you've got the far northern New England area that probably needs school. You've got metropolitan Boston that probably needs 2 or 3. You've got Rhode Island that needs 1 or 2. For a small region, it's got a big imprint on the business.
Yeah.
And its alumni are all over, and you can always bring them back to be able to teach and coach. And I think that's one of the great things about it. And a lot of very passionate fans. I think one reason why independent wrestling survives in New England is because some promoters have figured out, I don't need to give them the WWE. I just need to give them entertaining wrestling in our way, in our fashion, and do it professionally and consistently. And if we do that, the people will come. And I think they've shown that they will.
What would you say has been the best piece of advice that you've received?
Oh, God, in my life?
Yeah, well, within the wrestling business.
Oh, within the wrestling business. Listen. That was the first thing. Listen. Listen and learn. That was the thing. So I was vociferous about, very vigorous about finding information. So for me, I was always looking at old matches. I was like, for example, one of the things I used to do is if someone told me that they were a fan of, let's say, Tully Blanchard, and I knew I was going to be wrestling them later, I would go and I'd watch a bunch of Tully Blanchard matches because I knew that I could look at something there that they would find familiar that they could then do, and they could work around that. Then I also learned about there are things you could do that people hadn't seen in years, but you could bring it back to something that was new. And that's one reason why I went with the sugar. Nobody was doing it. Nobody was seeing Bob Roop or Ron Garvin, anymore doing it. So it was easy for me to bring it back and use it and to get it over pretty easily because it's a pretty easy move to get over if you want to. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the other thing with folks is the listen to the crowd, right? Listen to your opponent, listen to the referee, listen to history. And if you do that, then and that's the same thing that works all the time. A big mistake I see with lawyers sometimes, particularly in cross examinations, they have a set of questions they want to ask, and they do this in depositions a lot, and sometimes in cross exam. They will got a set of questions they're going to ask, and they ask the questions, and they get the answer, but they're not really listening to the answer. Instead, they're going on to the next question. It's like, you can't do that. You got to listen to the answer, because that will partially tell you where you need to go next.
Right.
And so I think it's the same kind of thing. It's years ago, I was doing an interview for God, I can't remember. It might have been Mike Jazz. I can't recall who, and they asked me about promos. And I said, well, I'm a pretty good promo because I saw great promos, and I didn't just enjoy them. I listened to them. I figured out what they were trying to do, what they were trying to get across. And that if you do that, then you know how to do a good promo. Now, your styles will differ, all the time. Dutch Savage is not Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel is not the Crusher. The Crusher is not Tito Santana. Tito Santana is not Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper is not Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes is not Ric Flair. Ric Flair is not, Harley. Each of them have their own different style, but the basic elements are the same in all of them. Yeah. That's it. Where are we fighting? Why are we fighting? Why should people come see the fight?
Right.
I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If we do that, and we do that, we make that work, then everything else falls into place.
Right.
And I think that's been the best advice I've ever gotten, was listen. The other best piece of advice would have been from my stepfather, from Daddy. He was a carpenter, hailed from Texas, so he had a whole lot of that Texas, old school wisdom in him that would come out with. And he would always say, son, remember, measure twice, cut once. The lesson being, take your time to plan what you need to do, and then you will only need to do it once.
Wow, that's a great piece of advice. Measure twice, cut once.
Yep, measure twice, cut once. And I find that with, for me, particularly in my legal writing, every time I've ignored that rule, I look at something I wrote later, and I'm like, God, this is shit. But then whenever I follow that rule, I've looked back on it and been like, yeah, this works. This works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, you mentioned a couple things that have obviously changed in pro wrestling over the years, or maybe something that's missing, now in comparison to when you were in there. But on the flip side of that, what would you say is around now that you really wish was there when you were involved 15, 20 years ago?
Oh my God. Well, the internet. I mean,
So
very, very little of my career is recorded. I know there are tapes somewhere out there that I'll find from like 15 years ago that I've never seen. So most of my career is not there. It's a blip and a dust in the wind. There were great matches earlier, even those that predate me, that don't exist because they were taped over or they weren't saved in a variety of ways, whereas everything is saved now. That is, I think, great. You have some people who their entire career is going to be recorded.
Yeah.
And that to me is great, because it's great for the history. It's great for them too. It's great for their own legacy. It's great to show their kids. It's all that thing. Those things are so that's one thing. The other thing is the production values. I mean, even independents come up with great production values for their shows, and I think that makes for a better experience, both at the arena and for those who are viewing at home someplace else.
Yeah.
The more schools is a good thing. I think the more schools is a very good thing. Because if you're committed enough, you can learn different. I used to tell guys all the time, look, I can get you up to a certain point. After that, you got to go to somebody else. So I'm not going to tell you how to get into WWE. I didn't get there. So I can get you here to where when someone who can help you get into WWE needs someone at a certain level, I can get you there. There I can get you. They got to take the rest of the way. And I say it's always like, it's I can get you college, but you need graduate school.
Yeah.
If you want to be at the big boys, you need graduate school. Those guys are graduate school. So you need to do that. So I think we're seeing a lot of that in specialty schools. So the more schools, I think, is a very good thing. I mean, Santino Brothers here in LA is great. EWF does the Empire here with the School of Hard Knocks. But those are two out here that I know of that do really well. Of course, you got the Inoki Dojo out here as well, out in LA. The more I think has been better, because I also think the crappy ones don't really survive.
Right. They go by the wayside.
And the issue, the issue too is cost. I mean, these schools have to survive. They have to charge.
Yeah.
So what I'd love to see more people giving scholarships to these schools, or scholarship money, so they can, make it easier for these people trying to break in. to help these guys and gals go out there and make a huge ton of money. You know, I mean, let me put it this way. I make a certain amount of money. I'm not going to say what it is. And, you know, it ain't bad. You know, I don't have a whole room for complaints here. And it's about to get bigger. But I would say that a good chunk of that WWE roster makes far more than I do. And God bless them, because I know some of those people were wrestling in barns.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know they were wrestling in barns. I know they were wrestling at pool halls. I know they were wrestling, you know, at sports bars, you know, parking lots. I want them to make a freaking fortune. So the addition of more money is good for them as a career, for the health of the business. All that is good. Because I don't want to go through another period where we have only one promotion that runs everything. So the players are kind of trapped.
Yeah.
Right now, if AEW went away tomorrow, yeah, you might see salaries drop in the WWE, but even a drop for many of these people still will put them in the top 1% or less of the salary percentile in America.
Yeah.
You know, and so to me, that's good. That's really good. Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to venues, you know, you've wrestled all over the place, obviously, small and large. You know, did you have a favorite venue over the years?
In New England, it was the Quincy Armory.
Ah, yes.
It was the Quincy Armory. Yep. A lot of great memories there. A lot of great houses there. I saw great matches, great guys develop. I think I did some of the best work I've done there. That was a huge favorite. Getting the chance to both do roller derby and wrestle at the Cow Palace and at the Olympic Auditorium, that was great for me. That was something I would never, you know, forget. The ECW arena before it turned into what it turned into, because there was a great energy. I mean, I remember I was there. I think I'm getting ready to wrestle 911, and they know I'm going to wrestle 911. And so I'm standing in the ring, and the audience is telling me, Anderson, the straw hat guy is telling me, Anderson, yeah, run, get out of here now. And I'm like, what? You know, like I have no idea who's coming. And I just love that atmosphere. And they were so hungry. Oh my God, they were so bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just had an energy that you're like, oh, no wonder people love it. And then to think it got even more intense, that to me was great. I loved that.
Any memories of your former manager, the Paragon of Excellence?
Oh, as a matter of fact, I just saw Greg a few months ago because I was back in Boston for our 25th law school reunion. Yeah, he's doing great. He's in charge of a company now that does medical transcriptions and other analysis. He's got a lovely wife, 2 great kids. He is still hilarious. He's also doing acting. He's doing stage productions. He's writing plays as well. So he's been very busy, you know, with everything that he does. He's just been great. So yeah, Greg is doing well.
That's great to hear. And you know, I always thought it was a rare scenario because usually a manager is in place to speak because maybe the wrestler is a little limited. You were fantastic on the mic. He was great on the mic. The two of you together was a lethal combination. It was fantastic, you know?
Oh yeah. Our inspiration was Bobby Heenan and Nick Bockwinkel.
Yeah. Yep.
That was the inspiration. I mean, that was really it. That if we could get that going, that would work because he had it. The great thing was that with Greg was so unafraid of going over the top that it made it easier for me to level down. And so my interviews at the time I didn't go with humor a lot then. I could just be blazing intense, talking about here's what's going to happen. I'm going to be the top dog. I've been a top dog for 6 months. I'll be the top dog for the next 6 months. I'll be the top dog for as long as I want to be. Yeah. And he, with the book of the month club, said either you come in the ring, you take your lesson, and I hate you with a book. You know, he was, so it was very easy, and people wanted to kill him.
Yes.
So he was great at generating heat, great for giving me an escape valve, surviving by the hair of our chinny chin chin. But yeah, our whole inspiration for that was Heenan and Bockwinkel, because I thought the same. You had 2 of the best talkers, you know, ever, and in Heenan you have one of the greatest characters ever, and still, in my eyes, the greatest manager that wrestling has ever produced. Which is some pretty tight company he's got in there. But I always think, the battle isn't who's the greatest manager of all time. The fight is who's the second.
Right. And obviously wrestling has changed, but what advice do you have for somebody who's looking to get into the business now?
One, have a clear backup plan. That's one. Have a clear backup plan. But if you're going to go, then commit. When people tell you get in the gym, get in the freaking gym. When people tell you get in the ring and work, then get in the ring. If they tell you need to go and learn how to cut a promo better, then go to promo class. Go do all that stuff. Practice those things. Because here's the thing: a lot like, we have a saying in law: the law is a jealous mistress, and that bitch does not need to love you back. Yeah. And it's true. It is. She's a jealous mistress, and you have to give her everything, and she does not have to give you a thing. So when people ask me, should I go to law school? My answer is always the same. If you have to ask that question, the answer is no. You have to see law school as the thing you have to do what you need to do. And with wrestling, I think it's kind of the same thing with people say, if you want to do this and you want to do it as a living, then you've got to commit to that. And things are going to be slim. They're going to be thin for a while you try to work your way up and get there. Work everywhere you can. Get all the work in you can. Develop merchandise. Show that you can generate money on your own, and they'll know that you can generate money for them. If you do that, you're in a good spot, because that's the other thing that changed. What's that kid who just debuted with WWE on Survivor Series? Danhausen?
Danhausen, yeah.
Yeah, Danhausen, right? Danhausen. Now, I remember I saw Danhausen at AEW, I think. I was the first AEW show in Las Vegas. And my first thought when I saw him was, but all these fans knew who he was. So I'm like, oh, okay, so they know who he is. And and I found him entertaining, but I'd never seen him wrestle or work. Yeah. But his merchandise was everywhere.
Right.
And the name of the game is, make money. So he was doing that well. I remember walking down the streets of Long Beach, my old hometown. I'm seeing Young Bucks and Bullet Club merchandise all over the place when they're doing the New Japan show. So there was no AEW. This is the New Japan show. It's first time here in the States. There it was in Long Beach, and their gear was everywhere. I'm seeing the War Machine, right there. So one of the reasons all those guys got picked up is because they'd shown they can generate money.
Yeah.
And if you show that you can do that you've got some savvy as to what the business is asking you to do, then you do well. If you only see wrestling as a sideline, my advice is the exact same thing. Why not be the best wrestler you can be?
Right.
Why not be the best? I said one reason why when I was not putting in the time it took to keep my body in the condition it needed to be in. I wasn't doing that. So it's time for me to get out of the way. I was surviving on three things. My relationship, my mouth, and my knowledge of how to make things work. I saw myself then now I'd gone from the wannabe Ric Flair I wanted to be early in my career to now I was a late stage Dusty Rhodes. But I also think it was time for me to get out. Yeah. But there's no reason why I would still go to camps when there was a camp. Why? Because I want to learn. It's like if you only play golf on weekends, you still want to be a better golfer, don't you?
Right.
So this is where I do get a little bothered by guys who always say they don't have the time or the money to get better, but they always want to be booked. They always want to be booked in a position that's high. They want more attention. It's kind of like you can't do that.
Right.
And you also have to understand your role. Part of your role is see the future stars here, help them get better, help them move along. It's not enough if you win, but they haven't grown at all in any way. It doesn't matter. You haven't done your job. Your job is that they're smarter by the time they leave than when they came in. And if they surpass you, that's just the way it's supposed to be. And you should be proud of that. You should be absolutely proud of that.
Yeah, there's always something new to learn or a different way of doing something, which is fresh and,
Always.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Always.
So briefly here, you mentioned Bad Boy Billy Black earlier. If you had to pick three, who would your top three opponents be over the years?
Billy Black would be one. Vandal Drummond out here in LA would have been, two or three. The third, oh geez. The third would be, actually, it might be a tie. Yeah, it's probably a tie, and I'd say it's Jose. But the person I would put it in the third, I had a lot of fun working with Kyle. But part of it is going to be based on one match. I had so much fun in the I Quit match I did with Matt Storm that he'd have to be in that. He'd have to be in that mix somewhere. And then there were people who I'd never got to wrestle who I wanted to. I mean, I got to wrestle Chris Venom in a tag match, which I liked, but I never got to wrestle Bob. I never got to wrestle Slick Wagner Brown. I never got to wrestle Luis. Really? Those would have been people who I would have loved to have had matches with, and I never got the chance to do that. So that I feel bad. I did get to wrestle Todd Hansen, but it was never. It's almost like a rock thing. It was never on a show. We were at the wrestling gym. I'm trying to remember whose. I think it was Trooper Gilmore's spot. I think.
Okay.
I think it was that spot. But anyway, and it was kind of after hours, and we just improv'd a wrestling match, and we went for a good 90 minutes.
Wow.
We just had a good, hold for hold, back and forth, call a spot, then boom, then go back in the hold. It is one of the greatest memories of my life. Nobody saw it. He remembers it, thank God. And I remember it. And that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun.
Well, it shows, your level of talent when you can do something like that, go that long, number one, no crowd, no fan interaction or anything like that. It's just two guys, going hold for hold and creating some magic in the ring.
Yeah. In my younger years, my objective was I used to have great in-ring stamina when I was much younger. And then later it wasn't as great, but it was still very good, very good. In fact, one of the reasons I knew to get out, one of the reasons why I haven't come back for any other match except for that one in 14 or 15 was I was blown up in a match for the first time in my life. I'd never been blown up before. This time I was blown up, and I was blown up soon, and I was like, okay, I'm not doing any more, comeback matches for this. This is over. Yeah. But yeah, because of course I was used to Flair, Race, Briscoe, Terry Funk, all these guys who did these, Backlund, all these guys who did these 1 hour title matches. So the thought was, well, you never know when you're going to have to do that.
Right.
And so that was great. I mean, it was the longest match in my career was a 2 out of 3 falls match for 90 minutes, and we had the first 2 falls in like the first 25 minutes, I think. So the rest was a battle for the third fall. Looking back on that may have been a huge mistake. Because there was a big lull with the crowd, and then finally we started, turning things up more, and then we had to really start figuring out, okay, how are we gonna draw this out?
Yeah,
how are we gonna draw this out now? We had the second fall too early. How are we gonna draw this out?
Right.
So there were a lot of submission holds in that one, a lot. But at the end, it worked out fine. But that was then. Back then you had to. You tend to match who it is you idolize.
Yeah. And real quick, just having a little fun here. Mount Rushmore. If you had to pick a Mount Rushmore of New England specific male wrestlers, who would that be? Male wrestlers, New England specific, any era.
Oh my God. Wow. That's a tough one. Actually, I already know one person I put in there without hesitation is Billy. I put Billy Black in there without a moment's hesitation. He was fantastic. Real easy to work with, could do a variety of things with just about anybody. I can't put Levesque there because I didn't see him during his New England period. I saw him later. I saw him when he was more developed.
Yeah.
And so putting him in there when I've seen him develop is kind of unfair. I thought that let's see, Slick. I mean, Slick was really, great in the ring.
Yeah.
I think that I thought he could have emoted more sometimes, but I think the physical, bell to bell stuff, he was really damn good in there. Let's see. Also, I would put. He may not have been the greatest in ring, but he was good enough to do what he needed to do and good enough to know how to show what other people can do. And you got to put Tony Rumble. Because he knew when to give. He knew when to give and knew how to make people shine. And, even when he wasn't, in the ring. And so I know I'm kind of cheating there, putting someone who's well known for promoter as much as a wrestler, but I think you got to put Tony in there.
Yeah.
In the fourth, I'm going to show my bias again. I'm going to go Jason Blade.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to go Jason Blade because I thought Jason had the ability to go as far as he wanted to in the business. I think there were just other decisions and other things he wanted to do. I think that were the change. But yeah, that if I had to, that'd probably be, then ask me again tomorrow, and or maybe so much. But in my book, number one is always going to be Billy.
Yeah, that's the thing. Mount Rushmores can change. On the flip side of that, do you think you could come up with the women of New England specific?
Oh, well, that's easy. I mean, for one, Mercedes Martinez.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to not say Mercedes Martinez, who took forever to get noticed on a bigger scale.
Mm-hmm. Never gave up.
Yeah, I mean, it took forever to get noticed, but she was, I mean, fantastic. She was and how many of the women in New England looked up to her because of what she did, right? And if we're talking about people who looked up to him, even if you didn't think the ring work was as great as some others, you can't exclude April Hunter.
Right.
I mean, April was such a huge factor for so many of these ladies who wrestled. She too was a mentor to so many. And she had no problem portraying tough, aggressive, in there wrestling. She wasn't doing the, hey, I'm just going to pull you by the hair and throw you for it. No, she got in there. She wrestled. She did these things. And for a lot of ladies, that's what kind of set their mark. God, I don't want to forget her name. Wait, didn't Beth start there? I could have sworn Beth Phoenix had started in New England, didn't she?
I don't know if she got her start here, but she definitely had some early matches here.
Yeah, I remember her wrestling here, which was really good. Nikki rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly. And again, I'm going with the eras of people who I saw, and there are others. I didn't see Sandy Starr when she was working much. So I can't list her, but I can list, Nikki, obviously, I think. And I remember seeing, the former Sasha Banks, in New England. Was it Mercedes Moné? Is that the name she's using now?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, Mercedes Moné. In New England, when I was back for just one show. I remember seeing her. I remember talking to her afterwards and saying, look, I hope you keep this up because you've really got it.
Yeah.
You've really got it. And she was like,
climbed that ladder pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she did. I mean, just an incredible, talent and everything. And I think this is where Sheldon deserves some credit for putting on those women's wrestling shows because there was a lot of women's talent. Like if you hand me a program, I'd go, oh, yeah, I remember her. Because they had a lot of really good, talented ladies who were working those shows. So having a platform for them to be seen and to deliver. And they did. They delivered on their shows.
Yeah.
So I really I liked it. Yeah, there were some wonderful talents out there. Sumi.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean Sumi Sakai was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't put her on a Mount Rushmore of New England wrestlers.
Right.
She was great.
Tough. A lot of great talent around that era specifically, of course. Even Mistress Belmont, she was great.
Oh God. See, you've hit me already, right?
Yeah.
Mistress Belmont, Delmonica. I mean, oh my God, there's so many great ones. God, why am I Jillian? I'm trying to remember her real name. I mean her working name. But yeah, Jillian was great. There were so many great young ladies that were going on out there, and that's like I said, that's one of the reasons I really give my hats off to Sheldon too, because he showed that these people, these ladies out here, they can do it. You just got to give them the platform.
Right. Mm-hmm. 2 more questions for you. Selling in wrestling.
Yes.
I feel like that's just not even really much of a thing anymore.
How
important is it, you think?
I think it's everything. I just, like I said, it's one of the reasons why certain selling, irritates me. I've seen people come up, they do the, they come up for some kind of bump, and it's like they do the, the hit, and then they go, back down real fast. I'm like, okay, if you're all doing the same sell, then it's not working. Yeah. We already talked about the shock pin look, which drives me nuts.
Right.
Because they also do it early, so there's no build.
Right.
I think that's one thing that bothers me is that there's not a build in the selling. It's your facial expression at the beginning of the match and near the end of the match should be very different. Because you start off, you're fresh. At the end, you should be looking like, Christ on a cracker. Like you're fighting for, like you're pulling it all in together to do things. And I think it's one of the problems with the choreography is that everybody's planning out the choreography of the match, but nobody is planning out, or very few are planning out, what emotion goes with it. Yeah. What do you do? I mean, I always tell people one of my favorite examples is watching Ricky Morton, being, brutalized by the Midnight Express. Just brutalized. There it is. And, rear chin locks on him, and he's reaching out to the crowd. He's reaching to them, and he utters the word. You see him go,
yes.
And they're like, come on, Ricky. And he knows that the corner is Robert. He's not looking at Robert. He's looking at the fans, and the fans are thinking, come on, Ricky. Come on, Ricky. Get on there. You can get him. Bobby's got him. Bobby's waiting for, come on, Ricky. It's glorious. They're on their feet. Reaching it, and if it's a cutoff, you don't go, damn, come on. And when he finally gets there and gets the hot tag, with something other than a double down, thank you very much. And Robert comes in, the place is going to uncork because Robert is going to look like I'm mad as hell and I ain't going to take it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. Is that you come in because your buddy's been brutalized. You've got to look like, motherfucker, here I come.
Yep.
And I don't see that enough. It's the tag. Come, okay, here I go. High spot here. Let's go. Next high spot there. Next, I can't carry through. The other thing is, I'm sorry, heels have to not be afraid to look scared. Be heels. Who begs off anymore? Friedman? I think MJF, that's about it. I don't see any other heels really that are doing that. Especially if you're a chicken shit heel, we know the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. You are aggressive when you are on top, and when it is time for your comeuppance, you're like, oh no, we can talk about this. No, I don't. No, it's the that utter look of fear. That's when why are you now having? You don't want the shock look. Oh, he got out. No, instead it's got to be 1, 2, kick out. Damn it.
Yeah.
Because you want to end this thing. You want to go home. You don't want this guy getting back up.
Right.
Because if he gets up, he's gonna kick your ass. And you do not want that. I tell people, go watch Tully Blanchard's reaction to Dusty Rhodes comebacks.
Yeah. Yes.
Go watch them. It becomes an elevated fear. As I was like, I've hit you. Dusty's kind of like, and Dusty's comebacks. I admit, I stole so many of my comebacks from Dusty. With that whole one step push. Okay, all right, come on. Boom, come on. It's like, oh fuck. And then you rear back and you punch because like here he comes.
Yeah.
Lawler was just a master of that. Oh my God. I remember the first time I saw him in Memphis throw the strap. And at the time, of course, I was young. I didn't know what it meant yet. But he threw the strap, and I'm telling you, the whole fucking arena went bananas.
Yeah.
Just bananas. I was like, oh my God. So I knew, which is one of the sad things when I would see him in WWE and he'd throw the strap and there was no reaction because the fans didn't know.
No.
They hadn't been educated to it.
Right.
Less
is more. We've given them too much, like you said.
Well, yeah. And the other thing I think that's a big part of it is if you don't teach them to wait for a buildup, then they're only going to want it, here all the time, and it causes people to lose simple steps. We talked about finishers. Now we got people who come up with more complex looking finishers than I could ever have thought of. And my view sometimes becomes, why are you doing something that complex looking? Why? Simplify this thing. Yeah. You picked them up and pump handle here and lift them over your head, and then a triple spin there, and then put them down, and then boom, and here we go, the 1, 2, and the 3. I'm like, is there any way we can simplify that? Because it looks like it's taking a while to get into. Yeah. And so, but again, I'm an old fogey here, Joseph. I don't, I'm the guy who can watch Dory Funk Jr. and Jack Briscoe go 60 minutes. I could watch that every day. I really could. I can tell you what. But that's not what the kids today here want. They want to see the triple flying somersault backspin spooneroonie with a quarter twist.
That's what it is. Yeah. And you love it all. There's all different aspects from every era that are great.
Absolutely.
And, you keep going with it, and it's all awesome. But you do miss some things that you used to over the years, and that's just the way you have to look at it. And chiming in on your inner fan, what would you say is your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling as a whole?
Oh, God, that is impossible. I would have to go either decades or countries for it to work. Yeah. Because if I was to do countries, for me, well, let's start with England. At the top of the list for me, without question, Mark Rollerball Rocco, number 1 on my list, forever. Number 2, Billy Robinson, got to go Billy, no question about it. Number 3, Mick McManus, huge star in every possible way of the game. Number 4, I'd go with Johnny Saint. That would be my 4. If I had to go Japan, number 1 for me, always Riki Chosu. Always Riki Chosu for me at number 1. Number 2, Jushin Thunder Liger.
Oh yeah,
gotta be for me. It's got to be Liger. Yeah. Number 3, I think he's earned it now. It's Tanahashi. I think Tanahashi, deserves that spot. And at number 4 for me, Jumbo Tsuruta. If you come to the States, this is where it gets really hard. Right off the bat, Ric Flair. I think he's the best overall talent the business ever had. Just 2 would be for me, Briscoe. I love Jack Briscoe's wrestling. I just love his wrestling. Everything about him as a wrestler just made me go, God, this is fantastic. Number 3, again, I'm putting somebody in there because of their wrestling. It's Bret Hart. Bret Hart. Number 4, though not a personal favorite of mine, it would be impossible to have a Rushmore without Hogan on it. It's kind of hard. So it's not my personal one. I think I'd put him there because that's where he belongs, in history. If we're going, if I was doing personal, I was allowed to pull him off and put somebody else on for favorites for me. Lawler. Lawler, because he wrestled so many people for so long in so many ways. So many guys have their careers in part because of how great they did in Memphis, and he could do it as a heel or a babyface equally great as both. I've always told everybody, if all you saw of Jerry Lawler was what you saw in the WWE, you didn't see the real Lawler.
That's the thing. Lawler had such a huge career, and most of it wasn't even on television.
No, that's the thing.
Well, not on TV here.
Yes, exactly. Not on TV there. But all that stuff from Memphis, I tell everybody, go get Memphis. Go see what he was able to do. Go see the video packages they were putting together. Yeah. There's this one great video package about the Loser Leaves Town match between he and Bill Dundee. And it's done to the tune, not the theme from Rocky, but there's another song from Rocky, bum 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 bum, and they do a great video montage of that match, and it's in the great drama, and that wonderful middle part it has with da 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 da. Da 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 da. I think in the first Rocky it shows up in the final round of their first fight. But yeah, that package was great, just great. So yeah, that would be my That'd be my list. I mean, I've seen so much wrestling from so many different eras and so many different places. So even then, I usually want to break it down into decades. But
Yeah, no, it was great to hear all the different variations. I like that, and some of my earliest memories of wrestling. I mean, I was a young kid. Were these VHS tapes that you would see in stores? They weren't WWF. One had Bundy on the cover, one had Savage, one had I think Andre. But most of the content on the tapes were Memphis wrestling, and whereas there was no internet back then, I couldn't get Memphis. Where I was. So this was my introduction to that. Obviously, I would see it in the magazines eventually. But seeing those matches and Jerry Lawler and early Rick Rude and Coco Beware and all these guys, amazing. Memphis wrestling, and that was just a small taste of it, obviously. But that was my initial introduction to them, and it was just what a territory.
Oh yeah, I remember when the announcement was made that Savage was coming to WWF. And I was telling all my friends who hadn't seen him, about him, but I'd seen him in Memphis. I was like, "You have no idea what you're about to see." So this guy is intense. you're gonna love him, And of course, he shows up, and they're like, "Holy shit!" I was like, "Yeah, he's, he was phenomenal, just phenomenal." But yeah, in Memphis, these great promos, and my Mount Rushmore on announcers. One of them is Lance Russell. I think Lance Russell is one of the greatest announcers there ever was. My holy trinity is Jim Ross, Gordon Soley, and Lance Russell. Each one of them had different jobs to do, and they both did them well. I grew up thinking of wrestling as more of a sport because of Gordon Soley, right. And his approach to it. And I thought it was still a sport and exciting, the presentation from a Jim Ross. And Lance was great because Lance was like the local town uncle who kept everything in order with it. Now, wait a minute, let's not go there. Keeping things calm. When it came to announcing matches, he was, and he hits him with a big elbow from off the top rope. Yeah. Oh my goodness, he punched the referee. That'll cost him some change. He was great. He was wonderful. Oh my God, I love Lance Russell. So yeah, that's my trinity right there, those three.
And in closing, looking at your career as a whole, fast forwarding years from now, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be?
I'd like the legacy within to be that I cared about other talent and I wanted them to get better. And I was more than happy to help the talent and the promotions in any way I was asked to. For fans, if any do remember, I just want to be remembered somebody who they were entertained by. That they, especially, it's funny because I preferred being heel to being babyface, but I'd be an idiot to say that I was not a better babyface than I was a heel. I think that that's the truth, that I was just a better baby, connected differently, with that. And so for them, if they thought of, Ebony Blade or Gemini Kid as a heroic figure, that they felt I played the role well enough. And if they booed me, I hope they liked booing me. So that's all. But yeah, but then I just like someone who was helpful to the rest of the people who I worked with.
And you've given some great inspirational speeches, in the locker rooms over the years, to the boys, to the wrestlers, prior to the shows, get everybody hyped up and ready to rock and roll. A lot of the fans haven't really seen that side, or those types of speeches often. So why don't you just give us a little taste, what you're feeling today for the viewers, for the fans, and we'll end it on that note.
Sure. Now, for those of you out there who are wrestlers and you're getting ready because you've got matches coming up on the next weekend, I want to talk to you. I don't need to talk to the fans because that's your job. I want to talk to you because I want to remind you of something. I want to remind you that you are part of what we call the great ring of friendship. You are part of a history that continues. That when one of us falls off a piece, another piece, you fills that up. That the legends begin to make way for new legends. And that is you. Right now, you may be asking yourself, what do I need to give? And the answer is everything. Not because it's your obligation to them, not because it's an obligation to the trainers. It's because the obligation you owe to yourself to be as good at what you do as you can possibly be. You see, some of you became wrestlers because you heard the cheers and you said, I want to be cheered. Some of you did it because you heard the boos and you said, I want to be booed. Some of you did it because you saw a great athlete, whether his name was Sean Waltman or Shawn Michaels or Ricky Steamboat or Jushin Liger, or whether it was somebody with the name of a young buck. And you said, I want to do that cool stuff. You owe it to that dreamer who wanted it to make the dream come true. And you only get there when you've given it your all and you're able to say when it's all said and done, I've got nothing left to give. Because if you do that, let me tell you what you will get in return. I'm not going to promise you riches, because only some of you are going to get that. I'm not going to promise you glory, because only some of you will get that. What I am going to promise you is this: the respect of your peers, the respect of yourself, the respect from your fans, and the respect of the wrestling gods who left the legacy in your hands when they stepped out of the ring for the last time. Oh, I will promise you your body will ache later. I will promise you this. I will promise you as well that you will spend time away from home. I will promise you as well you will spend late nights. I will promise you as well that you will be tempted. And for each of those things to make it worthwhile, it's only worthwhile when you have been able to look in the mirror and say, the challenge was given to me. I answered it. I left it all in the ring. I left it all on the field. I left it all with the fans. And now the only thing left is for me to pass it on to somebody else. But before you pass it on, my friend, remember, this is your time. And while you're in it, while you're suffering with the blood and the toil and the sweat and the travel and the late nights and the light wallets, before it all pays off in here, before you've given it all up, enjoy it. Because we've all learned we all do the job to Father Time. But when we have that last sleep, my friend, when the bell starts to count 10 for you, that you're able to leave knowing you did it, you loved it, you lived it, and you gave it back. Because we are all here in memory forever. Say amen.
Amen. Now that was a promo. Eric Darnell Anderson, of course, the great Ebony Blade. Thank you so much for taking the time, being here with us for this in-depth interview. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure, Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you. For the great Ebony Blade, I'm Joseph Bruen. This has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, what you thought of this episode, who you'd like to see next. And we'll see you all next time.